Lo-fi as a term covers a huge array of different styles of music. However, I think it's fair to say that most people, especially more casual listeners, would associate it with this perpetually studying character. So I've been making music for Lo-Fi Girl for about 4 years now, and I thought it was about time that I made a fresh beginner's guide to making this style of music with the project file for Ableton included, which has got some playable instruments and some sounds that I've recorded that I think you'll find very useful as a sort of template starting point. There's a few things that you need to download to make full use of the project file, but they're all completely free. So make sure to watch that section of the video to know what to download before opening the project. But yeah, I'll break down everything from scratch and show you how everything works in just a second. And quickly before I do, I'm also going to be making a sort of producer's guide to the lo-fi scene, talking about labels and playlists and that sort of thing. So if there's any questions on promotion or playlisting or labels in the lo-fi scene that you've got, please do drop them in the comments down below and I'll answer them in that video. But for now, I'm going to dive in and break down this project from scratch. So just before I start the breakdown, this is what the track is going to sound like. This is just a little section where we're rising up towards the drums and the bass coming in initially. So we've got lots of textures, soft piano, a little riser to the drop, and some nice texture in the drums, as well as some atmospheric sounds as well. And everything in this track, as I said, is either stock Ableton or is free to download, and I'll talk about what you need to download in a little bit as well. There's some interesting things in this project for most people that could be useful, such as some drum textures that you can reuse in your own tracks. And I've got a little bass line here in sampler that could be useful, which I've recorded my bass for, so you can get that sort of P-bass sound without having to play the bass, which is useful. I'm going to record more of my instruments in the future for playable sampled VSTs, but yeah, just a little one-shot thing that could be useful. But what I'm going to do is go in from the top and break down each different track and the sort of process behind it. So as always, you're going to need some soft ambience atmosphere. For this one, I've used a sort of coffee shop atmosphere, which has got that soft vinyl crackle, not too loud in the mix, and it's got some sprinkles of sort of Foley texture from the coffee shop recordings, which just adds a little layer of depth and character to the track. Always nice to have. There's loads of them in my last sample pack. My favourite to use is this sort of busy market atmosphere, which has got that sort of soft mumbling of a market with the vinyl crackle that again adds a great depth. But for this one, I went for the coffee shop vibe. So the first thing that I usually do when I'm writing is get the main sort of chord progression down. It could be piano, guitar, or something else. Whatever it is, I like to make sure that I'm happy with the main sort of core of the track, which for this is the piano. So I've used a few different pianos to get the sound that I want. This is the sort of A section. So I'm playing an F minor 9, A flat major 7 to an E flat. And I sort of vary it slightly as I go through. I do 2 passes round just to make sure it's a little bit varied as we progress through this track. So I change the sort of complementary notes, which can change the chord a little bit as well to different variations or inversions. So that's the main sort of sound. I've also got a B section piano here, which just plays it a sort of more simpler way for the little dropout. So less of the embellishments, just straight up chords. Just brings it down for a bit for the dropout of the drums. So to get this tone, I started off with the Labs soft piano, which I'm sure most people have already got by now. It's a great piano sound for the sort of low-end warmth character piano. This is what it sounds like on its own. To add a little bit more texture to the top end, I've added 2 decent sampler pianos, and you can hear it all sort of just sort of brights it up and gives it more character, because these have got more of the sort of noises of recording piano, the key noise and player noise, etc. So the first of these 2 is the Kawai felt piano, which is a free piano book sample library. Sounds great on its own, but I used it for the sort of top end, added some saturation and some delay to this. This is what it sounds like in isolation. Just adding a little crunchy top end. And then secondly, I've got another piano, which is the Winterfelt piano. Again, another piano book freebie, as is Decent Sampler. I'll talk about how to get these at the end. But again, this is adding more of the top end. So these 2 together, you can hear it's bright. I'm cutting the lows to make sure it's not getting muddy with the Labs piano. And if I add that with the Labs piano, we get this nice crunchy but soft texture. And when I'm writing these chords, I usually come up with the chord progression, but I'll make sure that I play it in a sort of more staggered way. So we're not just playing block chords, which can be great in some contexts, but for this we want it to be soft and staggered. The There's no sort of science to it. You can start off playing the bass notes and roll to the top end, start at the top end, whatever it is, but just adds a little bit more variance and character, because each time I'm playing a chord, I'm not playing it the same, I'm playing it differently, which can sort of change how it feels a little bit. It's all about adding variance and natural sort of sway to the track. And then also I'm adding in embellishments to help me transition. Just little things like that help to elevate the track. And on top of that, I'm making sure that the loop is fairly long. So it's not just a short 5-second loop that repeats throughout the whole track, because that'll get repetitive. So each loop here is like, what, 30 seconds, 2 passes round of the chord progression. Each time it's different. Play that twice, and then we go to the other section, which again is the same chords, but it's played differently. And again, for this piano group, it's I've got a little bit of an EQ on the bus, but it's just playing the same 3 instruments. And it's worth noting as well, on the first bus, I've got this little freeze texture, which I've just taken the last chord, reversed it, and it just builds up to this sort of drop. Just helps transition a little bit nicer. So that's the piano chords, but also I've got the piano lead, which this time is just the Winterfeld piano. And I've got some EQing on there just to get rid of some of the resonance that I was getting, a little bit of convolution reverb. Again, cutting the lows with an auto filter, a little bit of filter delay, and then cutting the top end, which I sort of filter throughout the track. So it's a little bit brighter towards the end. And for the B section, it's sort of a little bit muffled with the sort of low pass on. And this is what it sounds like. Here it is, sort of brighter. It's a really nice piano. It just worked better in this context. It cut through the mix a little bit better than the other 2 pianos, which is why I used it in its isolation. So those 3 cover all of the pianos. Next up, it's time to add textures and sort of ear candy to the track in the form of pads and vocals and arps and stuff like that. So to do this, I've used various things from Labs, because Labs has got some great atmospheric stuff. So I'll make a list of everything that I've used from Labs in the description down below, just so you can download it all before you open the project. It doesn't mess it up for you. But this one that I used initially was the Mika's Choir. I think it's Mika, I'm not sure. And this is just a nice soft vocal patch. So I've got the echo on there with a bit of reverb, a bit of delay. Cutting the lows again to keep the track nice and clean. You don't need too much muddiness in the textures. I've also got a texture from the Warped Laments section, which is the same sort of library, but it's a little bit of a brighter patch. And they're both playing the same thing. They're just playing the root note, but missing one in between. I've also got 2 more Labs textures. One is the pedal pads tape piano, which is in the introduction and in the break. And these are just playing the sort of chords without any embellishments, just block chords. I've quantized it so they're all on the beat, and just plays through the chord progression to complement the piano. And we've got a little cello texture again from the Labs. This is the D minor melancholy patch, and that just helps the introduction sort of flow a little bit. Really nice phrase. And then on these, I've got a bit of filtering to cut off the frequencies that I don't want, and some reverb. I could probably put that at the end as well. So yeah, that's the Labs textures. I've also got a little ARP, which is an Ableton patch that I quite like. It's a synthy sort of patch. So it's the brush bell hits. Sounds like this. Bit of overdrive, compression, filtering, reverb, and an echo on there as well to keep it reverby ambient. And then of course the arpeggiator at 1/8 rate. Got the gate quite high to give it a nice sort of ring to it without going too abrupt. And that comes in as soon as the drums come in and plays for the rest of the track. And finally, I've got the vocals. So these are vocals from my last pack, Organic Lofi Hip Hop Volume 1. Absolutely loads of stuff in here that's super useful. Getting so much use out of this stuff. You can also use things like Arcade, or you can use the Labs free vocal stuff as well. But these are just nice sort of more defined phrases, which I've put an echo on there to give them a little bit of reverb. And it just about finishes off the track nicely. Got nice width to it. So if I solo the first 2 that we've talked about so far, there's a lot of depth to it with the various textures that come in and out. The vocals give it a nice width, and the key sort of carries the melodic flow of the track. Then on top of that, I've just played a bass line with the sampled bass that I had, a bit of compression, saturation, and a little EQ on there. And that's just playing the root notes of the piano. It drops out in the middle section as well. Got a kick, which is again from one of the free sample packs that I did. It's the ML Lofi Kick 3 from the free Organic Lofi Hip Hop pack. And I've textured a kick felt soft on there, which is just the top end crunch, and that's just an Ableton standard sample. And then finally onto the drum bus. So there's not a crazy amount going on here. I've got a sort of folder full of textures that I've recorded myself. I would highly recommend you do the same, even if it's just using your phone. You can get some great little Foley ambient sounds just doing stuff yourself. So this one was from one of my sample packs. I've got loads of Foley loops in the last Organic Lofi Hip Hop sample pack, and that is just one of them. The samples have got loads of texture, width, ambience to them anyway, so I'm just making sure that's there in the frequencies that I want, so cutting the higher, cutting the lower frequencies, just to give it this sort of mid-crunch. A couple of Foley, sort of pitter-patter with the brushes on the table. Same again, and then a little very soft shaker. So that's all the sort of Foley core of the drums. Then on that bus, I'm sidechaining it to the kick, just to give it a little bit more movement. Some reverb, very tiny amount, and some filtering as well. I've got this little hi-hat loop, which was, again, just for some Ableton hi-hats that I've flattened. Made sure they were mono, they weren't mono in the recording, but I wanted it to sort of be more front and center, so it monoed it. That textures nicely with the sort of Foley stuff. And then finally, a nice crunchy snare. So the snare is, again, some of the free samples from my Organic Lofi Hip Hop free pack, layered in with this Room Bedroom, which was an Ableton sound that I quite liked. So that's it for all the instruments. Then we've got a little bit of filtering to help with the flow of the track. So on the instrument bus, firstly, I'm making everything below a certain frequency mono just to keep it nice and clean. I've also got some automation on the filtering. So when the track starts, we've got the low end that starts to fade back in. And then it cuts it out as we get towards the drop as well, just to make the drop a little bit more impactful. We also reduce the stereo width so it goes super mono and then opens up as the drop comes in. And then on the drums, we've got again a little bit of filtering to sort of cut the top end off as we go into the little drop. Just smooths it out rather than being so abrupt. I've also got my tape rack on there from the Elephant Tape Ableton rack. I highly recommend checking it out. Links will be in the description down below. And that is it. So it's unmastered at the minute, but it's mix-wise, it's sounding pretty much there. I've got some EQing on various tracks just to keep it clean. And then as we build up, we're bringing back the drums slowly with a filter. So you can start to hear it coming in. And then we've got a curve here, so it's more impactful towards the end. Back in again, we've got the reverse. And then to finish it off, I'm just filtering off the volume. So that is the track. But before you download the project file, which will be for free in the link down below, there's a couple of things you just need to get to make sure the project runs smoothly. If you haven't already, go on to labs.spitfireaudio.com. Links will be in the description down below. Download the Labs software, and you need to download a few different patches, which I will link in the blog post down below. But yeah, feel free to browse through. There's so many great sounds on here. These are all free. You can pick whichever ones you want. They've got a handy little installer that will be downloaded onto your computer. So yeah, listen through, pick what you want, but there'll be a link of what you need for the project to run smoothly. And then after you've got that, you're going to need to go over to Decent Sampler, which is decentsamples.com, and get the Decent Sampler, which is free. And this just enables you to play some of the PianoBook plugins. And then finally, you can head over to PianoBook to get the sample libraries for a few of the other pianos that I've used in this video. So yeah, that is the track. If you are interested in learning more about making lo-fi hip-hop beats, I'll drop a link to a playlist of more tutorials that can teach you more specific things about different sounds that I've done in the past. And there's also a couple more beginner guides if you want more beginner information. This was just a sort of quick tour to get you going, as well as a project file that you can use as a template. Please do drop a like, drop a comment, and hit the subscribe button to hear more about the channel and help it grow. For now, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.